my channel and welcome to this little vlog-like video. If you've already read the title, you probably already saw that I went to YALFEST in Antwerp last night, the Friday the 20th, and I met some amazing authors like Tomi Adeyemi, Cass Morgan, Taryn Matharu, Laura Stephen, and Sarah Holland. And it was just such an amazing experience because we did this Q&A in which we could talk to the authors, and I asked a question to Tomi about the Instagram video she once posted, or on Twitter if you've watched it there, where she was crying over her book and I had a question about it. I think last night was such an experience for me as a writer because during the Q&A we were talking about writing and I suddenly had that surge in my very soul, I don't know if that makes sense, of me wanting to really get into writing again, even despite the fact that I'm so busy. But moments like that make me realize that I really know I want to pursue a career in writing one day. Just meeting the authors was such a great experience, and I'm going to post a quite long video behind this. I didn't film the complete start of the Q&A, only snippets, but the rest of the Q&A, some footage of like 37 minutes, I did film, and I will just paste it behind this one so you can watch it and perhaps get some information of yourself about writing and about the authors that will be attending YALFEST also on Sunday in the Netherlands. I'll also be going there, and yeah.
Literaire acteurs en recensent bij de Standaard en het Nieuwsblad. En men heeft mij gevraagd om vandaag het gesprek te leiden met deze 5 mensen. Ik ga niet te veel zeggen, maar op voorhand, we gaan het gesprek in het Engels doen. En ik ga niet vertalen, maar ik hoop dat de meeste mensen wel goed Engels begrijpen om te horen wat de mensen zeggen.
A picture of them, and I had never seen African gods and goddesses. So I'd seen like Zeus or Poseidon or Venus. I was used to those things, but I wasn't used to seeing someone who looked like me, like breathing fire, like commanding the ocean. So I always get inspired by visuals, so immediately I could see the magic and I could see the world, and I knew I wanted to write a story there. So that became, the basis for like the magical world. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, if I'm using, this West African Nigerian mythology, that means it can take place in like a society like that. Oh, and that means I can have giant lions. And so I just kind of kept building. And it was really fun for me creatively because I was able to use this beautiful thing that was also a part of my culture, but then make a whole, like, almost a new mythology out of her, build magic systems based off of it, so it was really fun.
Yeah. Mr. Matharu, you've written a number of books. You were fourth of those. How did you start again? Same question, how did you invent or began with the story of this young blacksmith guy?
So basically, De Nieuweling is effectively everything I love about fantasy in one book. And a lot of people ended up describing it as a mix between Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Pokemon. So if you like those things, you probably like the book. And I do agree, like those are probably the influences that came from the book the most. But really, it is just like, I've been searching for this fantasy book in the shelves. That was this book. I was trying to find it, and for some reason I just imagined that I would just come across it like this book that had all these amazing elements, summoning creatures to fight for you, elves, dwarves, orcs, magical academy, all these different things, and I couldn't find anything that even had 2 of the elements that I wanted, and that ended up being the book.
But how do you create I want to write about Harry Potter and Pokemon and the other stuff. And then you have to invent the story, and then you have to build the characters, and then you have to build the kind of, as I said, mythology.
Yeah. So you start with the world first.
Yeah.
Because I think characters are shaped by the world that they live in. So sometimes it's very hard to know who your characters are if you don't know the society that they grow up in, the challenges that exist there, what identity they have in the context of that society. So I think I started with the magic system first, that certain people are able to summon demons from another world, and these demons are kind of like Pokemon, but they're mythical creatures from real world mythologies. So for example, you have the traditional kind of Greek mythology creatures like griffins and minotaurs, salamanders, but then you also have mythological creatures from, say, Hawaiian mythology.
on a macro level, you know, personally, I was working at Starbucks when I started writing this. So as with any wage job, you're told, okay, your time is worth, you know, like $12 or $15 or whatever an hour. And so what if that was literally the case? And what if you could literally assign a monetary value to your time? And so I sort of spun out from there, and I was like, okay, well, it has to come out of your, you know, your body somehow. And it sort of made sense. I mean, you know, our blood has literal iron in it, and then I thought it was sort of like, it's sort of a gross, violent process in the book, the extraction of time, and I think that sort of fits with the violent nature of this society.
And then when you were working at Starbucks and suddenly this hit you, this idea and the blood and the money and coin, how did you proceed? Well, this is a kind of initial idea, and so maybe there's a story in it, or?
Yeah, so I thought maybe there was a story in it, and then I also had sort of the seed of the main character, Jules. I got an image of this girl who was sort of kneeling by the side of an icy lake, and I knew that she was upset and that she lost something, and she was angry, but I didn't know why or how she'd gotten there, or what she lost. So sort of the combination of those two elements, like the concept and the character, gelled together until I had sort of the frame of a story, and I went from there.
Is this the first in the series?
Yes. Yep, the first in a duology. So.
Yeah. And how does that work when you start out and you have a beginning of an idea, and then this book is being written? And then suddenly you realize, well, maybe there's a continuing story.
Yeah, you know, it's always kind of a leap of faith writing a book, with any book, especially a series. I knew that I felt like it was too big of an idea for one book. So I just sort of started writing it, and as with any book, you know, knock on wood and cross your fingers, and hope that, you know, your dreams come true for it, and that it gets to see the light of day as a published book. And in this case, you know, the powers that be, the editors who saw it agreed and said, you know, this is a bigger story. So.
Do you see yourself sitting, writing the first lines of the book, or the first story, chapter, or whatever, and thinking those things, thinking, well, maybe suppose I can finish the book, the ideas that I have in my head, and then suppose I can send it to an editor or to a publisher, and suppose that publisher is saying, we'll do it. This is a good book.
Yeah, well, I don't know about all you guys. I'm like a pretty heavy outliner, so
yeah.
I can't think on the fly at all. So I had my whole outline of the first book, and you know, I've read books my whole life, so I sort of feel like I have a sense of what a story looks like. And I knew that the Jules story was too big for one book, so I was just like, okay, I'll plot one, and then write it, and then see what happens, and then you know, plot book 2 and see where that goes.
Ms. Morgan, The 100, also a series, of course, also on Netflix. How did you start with these 100 young delinquents, juvenile delinquents, going back to Earth because some kind of nuclear disaster has happened there? What was the initial idea?
I started writing The 100 at the tail end of the big dystopian craze in young adult literature, and all these really brilliant books imagined sort of the unraveling of society. You know, what goes wrong? How do we basically destroy ourselves as a civilization? And those were fascinating, but a little depressing. And I started asking myself, well, what happens after? What happens after the worst befalls humanity? What's the next step? What happens if we get the second chance? So I see sci-fi as a little more hopeful than dystopian fiction. And I started thinking about that. Who would I want to be in charge if we had a second chance? And started thinking about teenagers, which is why it made sense to write this as YA. And then it was my editor who came up with the idea of these 100 kids, each who have committed a different crime in this space station and are sent to Earth as sort of a punishment, but also as a chance for redemption. And those two ideas really came together in this sort of perfect storm. And yeah, started from there.
A few minutes ago you mentioned I worked with a quite heavy outline. Is that true for all of you, or did some of you start writing and say, okay, I have this initial idea and let's start and then we'll see where the story takes me?
Yeah, I hate outlining. I think it's really boring, and I'm also a book editor in my other life. I'm not going to call it a day job because it's also day-night different books without outlining, and I didn't finish a single one. So the 100 is the first book I outlined and the first book I finished. Coincidence? Probably not.
So outline your book.
I think so, but whatever works for
I have
other
the
people.
same thing where every book I'd ever tried to write from when I was young to like when I was like 21, I would just get an idea and I'd be like, oh, this is great. And then 50 pages in, I'm like, we're done. And it was the first book that I outlined that I finished. So now it's like I'm an aggressive outliner because I know if I have it in bullet points, then like we can get to like 600 pages. But if I don't lay it out, I'll get to a point I'll be like, I don't know what to do anymore.
You mentioned a minute ago the first book I outlined, and when did you realize, well, maybe a writer is inside me? I would like to write a book. One of you, I read at the beginning, wrote his first book, I think, June.
Yeah,
You wrote your first book when you were 9.
No, that was, well, I didn't finish it, but I wrote 17,000 words of the book when I started at 7 and I stopped writing it at 9. Yes. My mom still like sends it to me because she had it on a floppy disk as well. And she managed to get it onto a USB, and then every now and again she emails it to me like, don't lose it. I'm like, Mom, it's still there. And she still says, send it to your editor, maybe they'll publish it. I'm like, Mom, but she's still my biggest fan. One time she's not very good with computers, but she spent a while going on like Google Images and like getting pictures and putting them in the Word document so that it would be like, oh, if you send it to the editor, she'll see like, oh, this scene has some ants in it, so she put like a picture of it. Yeah. So yeah.
Is that true for all of you? I mean, early readers, giant readers, and then suddenly thinking maybe, well, I can.
It's the kind of thing that makes total sense in hindsight. Like, I was definitely that kid going to the library every weekend and getting 11 books out and like finishing them by Monday and then being like, when can we go to the library again? And Dad's like, go away. I started writing books when I was very young. I was not disciplined enough to write 17,000 words and put it on a floppy disk. I wrote them in my school exercise books instead of doing the actual like work in class. So I have like scraps of stories basically in every school exercise book. But it wasn't until, so I went to university and studied journalism. So I was writing in a different sense, and it wasn't until after I left and I was working as a journalist that I just thought this isn't quite like scratching that creative itch in the way I thought it would. So that's when I turned to fiction. But it was the kind of thing, like, oh, of course I was going to do this. I've been reading and writing since I could.
What is the hardest thing when you're sitting behind your desk? And what is the hardest thing? Maybe some people in the audience also are tempting or wanting or thinking maybe I could do this.
Yeah, someone once told me one of the hardest things is to be creative and to have good taste, because you have the impulse to create, but then you hate it because it never lives up to your expectations. And I think that's something we all struggle with. We've read our whole lives. And so I think the hardest part is sort of accepting that the first draft is going to be awful and not punishing yourself for it, not thinking of yourself as a failure. And that's hard. And if you're, doing art or music, you can do a sketch of a drawing, in a day. If you don't like it, you do it again and again. But with a book, it takes so long to write that terrible draft and to have the discipline or the sort of self-delusion to keep going.
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part.
I forget who said it, but there's an analogy that talks about what you just talked about, and they call it the gap. So when you first start writing, you do it because you have really good taste and you know what story you want to be able to tell, and you start writing, and it just falls short of that taste. And a lot of people will give up then because they'll be like, oh, well, I'm obviously not very good. But it takes so much time to close that gap and finally get to the point where you can do your ideas justice. And like I say, like, this book was my 5th book, and I still feel like I've written 8 now, and I still feel like I'm not there yet. I still feel frustrated at myself that it's not what I want it to be. So I think, like you say, it's just persevering through that doubt and that realization that your writing's terrible, and that you have to just kind of keep going and keep trying to improve.
I also think when you're starting, we don't realize that our favorite book, the author wrote it again and again and again. And whenever someone tells me like, oh, I'm a writer and I loved your book, I was like, by the way, that's like draft 40. because we're holding like Harry Potter book 7, and then you're holding your like garbage trash fire of a draft, and you're like, I don't think I'm meant to do this because these are very different, but you don't realize that like, also not only did they write it again and again, but they have like an editor and they have critique partners, and so I always like to tell people, go to the acknowledgments and see the list of people that helped get that author to the book you're holding. Because a lot of times we're doing it like when we're kids and we're doing it alone, and we have our floppy disk and we're like, here's 300 pages of Naruto fan fiction, and you're like, you know, and in hindsight you're like, yeah, you're definitely a writer. What other nerd would do that with their free time? But when you're reading it, you're like, this isn't good, so I shouldn't do this because I'm not cut out for this.
Oh, I was you.
Yeah, I think every single writer on every project, no matter how many books or manuscripts you've written, has a brick wall moment where you just like you cannot see a way forward with the story. I know it's happened with all of my projects, and you just have to push past it and take a break, go for a walk, take a week off. There's always a way, even if it's just skipping that scene. But it's funny how no matter how many books you write, it seems like you still always have that moment.
Yeah, I get those moments. And I think for me is that I just write a rubbish scene so that I can get to the next scene. And then I'll come back to that rubbish scene that I wrote and I'm like, actually it's not that bad. If I change this and this, then it's actually okay. And then I can go. So that's my advice, is just write something you don't think is that good so that you can get onto a bit that you want to, and then go back and fix it. Or skip it if that works. I find it hard to skip.
Something else. The newspaper I work for, I'm a bit of the thriller. I like to read thrillers and crime fiction, and over the years I've met a number of thriller writers, crime writers, and we always end up talking about genre fiction. You write genre fiction in different ways. You write fantasy or science fiction, you write young adult books. Your books are labeled. How do you deal with this label that you're a young adult or your fantasy or your science fiction or whatever label they put on your books? Is that a problem? And you also have literature.
Yeah.
You have literature, and then you have all the other
Real
books.
books.
For instance, you
I
have,
don't see the problem because our readers don't care, and they're the only ones who matter. Like the only time the labels come into play is, when they're deciding what section to put it in a bookstore or a library. But our readers, they don't care what the label is. But actually, I find it doesn't matter. They can call it whatever they want. Science fiction, YA, romance. I don't know. Like what if
It's usually at least in the States, usually someone who comes forward with a label doesn't even read the books. They just want to go like this and be like, this isn't real literature. You're just like, nobody cares about what you're saying. So that's how I usually feel. Because you're just like, a story is a good story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's YA, it doesn't matter if it's fantasy, it doesn't matter if it's contemporary. Like if you've written a good story, then people will enjoy it. I usually find like if someone's bringing up labels, they're usually not, at least in the States, it's usually not someone who deserves attention because they want someone to say like, listen to all my opinions. And you're like,
because on your books, and it says you're a young adult.
Yeah. I think what
And I read it, and I'm not quite a young adult. And I really enjoyed the book.
Well, like Cass says, a good story is a good story. It can be difficult when you're talking about your long-term career, and a lot of people, if they love your first few books, they will expect you to keep writing the same iteration of the same book over and over again. But I write all kinds of genres and all kinds of stories. So now sometimes I'm like, are people just gonna forever expect that I write this like funny contemporary stuff? Like, as a reader, I read all kinds of genres, so I don't know why it's all this. You can't be like, I'm gonna write a thriller here and I'm gonna write sci-fi and I'm gonna write. But then they talk about branding, which is another thing. But yeah, I just think a good story is a good story, and I've even had like family members turn their noses up when you're like, oh, I sold a book, and they're like, what kind of book? And you're like, YA, and I'm like, oh. Is that because it's easier than writing for adults? And it's no, it's the same, and it's actually harder because I think teenage readers are a lot more impatient, and if they're not immediately hooked, they will put a book down. So you have to grab them in the first chapter. So I think it frustrates a lot of us when people dismiss it. Do you know how hard it is to write a book that immediately grips people?
I will say, I think that's part of why I love YA, is that at least in most bookstores, there's not different genre shelves within YA, it's just all on one big YA shelf. So, you know, I think maybe that actually gives us a little more leeway to play with genre than we would have in the adult space. So, like, one book I have on my bookshelf is about, I think it's maybe could be called sci-fi, about the president's son in the future, and he's like keeping his secret boyfriend a secret from his conservative dad, but also evil AI robot is trying to destroy the United States, and so he has to like stop this AI and keep his secret and like be the president's son. So it's like what adult book is being published that's like that? Like I almost appreciate the non-scrutiny that we get from, you know, like literature as a whole, because I think it gives us some space to play with genre.
Here comes a serious question. Are you moral writers? I mean by that, of course, the first thing you want to do is to write an exciting, suspenseful, funny, whatever tale. But then it deals with all kinds of things that happen in society. And maybe you want to teach or you want to say something about society, albeit in a story which deals with another society that you have invented or created. And in that way, are you moral writers?
I think it was...
Because your book deals with...
Yeah, mine's an intensely political book. George Orwell once said that the opinion that literature should have nothing to do with politics is in itself a political opinion. Because if you in your life have no awareness of political climate and of the issues that are facing society, you're in an amazingly privileged position.
On page 9 you mentioned Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler.
Yep, which is a very good page of them. Yeah, and I just think we live in a world where we're all thinking about that stuff now. So even if you're writing fantasy and sci-fi, like Tony's books address a lot of real world issues in a fantasy setting, and I think that's the way it should be. And I think a lot of people reject this idea that books should have a message, but like, why shouldn't we be exploring these complicated subjects? You know, we're not preaching, we're not saying this is wrong and this is right and this is what to do about it, but we should be exploring it.
How was that in your book? Because your book deals explicitly with race.
Yeah,
and
it
color.
was meant for that. And this story has come up a few times today, but people are like, oh, why did you choose to deal with kind of police brutality and race and colorism in a fantasy as opposed to a contemporary like The Hate You Give? And I said I actually was I didn't know if I should write a fantasy or I should write a contemporary, and I was talking to my boyfriend at the time, and I was just like, I have this big African fantasy in my head, but I also feel like I need to write something about this Black Lives Matter movement because that's what I'm feeling in my heart. And he's like, I don't think they're different books, I think they're the same book.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was like, yeah, like good opinion. Like, I was like, you're right. It was like, nice, because now I can do it together. But yeah, I very much felt the need to do that. And it's even strange being here. People, like my friends at home, they're texting me, they're like, oh, what's it like? And I was like, it's sad to me how safe I feel here. And I was just
In what way? Safe? I mean,
like literally, I'm not afraid for my life, and it's even more confusing to explain here, because
I'm a bit confused.
yeah, so it's really the U.S. is a mess right now, and it's bad if you're marginalized. It's really bad if you're black.
How bad? Can you give an example?
Like black people being shot in their backyards by police officers.
Yeah, we've heard the stories.
Even it doesn't always.
You as a young black woman.
Yeah, but even like I'm scared to get in my car because a lot of times when people die, well now it's the backyards too, but a lot of times it's someone just driving somewhere and the police will pull them over and somehow that ends in that person getting shot. And even if I'm just walking down the street and I see policemen, like my instinct is to get as far away as possible. And so I was explaining how last night I was in, I'm gonna say it wrong. Okay, nice. And I saw two police officers and my instinct is like, get away, but I was like, actually that's not a problem here. They're not just it's like they're not gonna kill you for no reason, which is kind of what's happening in the US. And it's very crazy, and that's the other thing, because I was like you're like, I don't get it, and I was like, I don't get it, but it's what's happening routinely. Or just like 2 weeks ago, these two black men were in a coffee shop. They were there, it was a Starbucks, they were there for 2 minutes. The manager called the police on them. And people were trying to explain to the manager, they're like, with how bad it is between black people and police officers right now, they could have been like beat up, they could have been tasered, they literally could have been shot. Like you don't know how it's gonna end if there's any interaction, and it's really scary. So I'm here and I'm like, wow, I'm not worried about being shot. I haven't felt that way for a couple of years. So it's a crazy thing, but that's also with the book. It's like I love fantasy, I love adventure, so the creative part of me wanted to do that. But the human part of me was like, I need to explain this to people because it's even for Americans, even for like when I talk to white Americans, they're like, I didn't know it was still so bad. Because it's crazy and it doesn't make sense. And so the book was a way for me to write the adventure I wanted to tell, but to also put my characters in similar situations emotionally, and then talk about like, yeah, there's a lot of fear, just daily fear. And I was like, I'm not nearly as scared for myself as I am for like my dad or my brother, because it's like if something happens to me, something happens to me. But like knowing that I could lose a family member that way is terrifying. So it's kind of it was impossible to keep that from the book because that's what I was going through in my life. So yeah.
Ms. Wong, may I ask, what is the major theme for you in your book? It deals with these people going back to Earth and trying to start a new life after a disaster has happened.
So
it's kind of ecological.
Yeah, I wrote it as entertainment. For me, in the beginning, it wasn't going to have the scope to explore, I thought, bigger themes. It just didn't seem like a vehicle for those kinds of discussions. But it's like Laura was saying, there is no such thing as an apolitical book. You are going to write to explore the world you know, to explore the world you hope to see, or the world you're afraid to see. So, it definitely deals with themes of ecological destruction, there are elements of totalitarianism, police brutality, but I think, as I was saying this morning in a different interview, I guess the themes I wanted to explore is like who deserves to be a hero and who has the moral right to stand up and say, this isn't the world I want, we deserve better. So what I find sort of interesting about my story is that these kids who sort of rise to the occasion and become leaders in this new world are all deeply flawed. They have violence in their past, they have been selfish, they have betrayed people they love, but they still are sort of the best chance Earth has at a second shot. So yeah, I guess that's the theme I wanted to explore. It's, what does it mean to be a hero? And you don't always have to be perfect to be the right person in that particular moment. So it's something I like to think about, especially in these moments of sort of reckoning and, our country, who is the person who should stand up and say something. You may not think you're the best person, but you might be the right person.
And Ms. Hall, how is that for you? Because you also feel like this is also kind of political book.
Yeah, I think, like, even if you set out not necessarily to send a message, you might not try to be a moral writer, but I hope, I think I would like to think of myself, and I think most of us would like to think of ourselves as moral people. Yeah. And I think if you can't separate that from, your work, whether you're a writer or, an artist or a lawyer or anything, I think it'll always show through. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard for somebody who is amoral. Let's imagine somebody who's racist and they're writing a book that has themes about race in them. I think it would be hard for them to write a book that doesn't reflect that part of their soul in the book, and I think it's recognizable. And I think the opposite is true as well. I think if you're a moral person, when someone reads your book, they see some of you in there. But for me, I don't like the idea necessarily of having a message. For me, it's more like holding up a mirror to society as I see it. So it might be a slightly warped mirror, but it is how I see it. And then letting the reader explore those issues for themselves. And maybe they'll see things through your character's eyes, and maybe your character's morality is reflective of yours. But I don't necessarily think I'm trying to teach anything or preach anything. And I think if somebody is, that really shines through. The reader can immediately see that they're trying to be forced with doctrine rather than just seeing a story. And because my book has multiple fantasy races in it, I think anybody who writes a book with fantasy races in it and there's no racism between those fantasy races is, I don't know. I don't think it's a realistic book. Because in this world where we are, we're so advanced and civilized in many ways, even minor differences in skin tone and culture can cause huge violence and hatred. And then you have completely different species living alongside each other with much more violent histories potentially. And there's no racism there. I mean, it has to be part of it. And there's a lot of stuff like that in my book as well: classism, sexism, police brutality, that kind of stuff. But I'm really not trying to say a message. I just want people to see it, examine it, and then view their own world in that context.
You're 5 quite young writers still, and you have a huge career ahead of you, and some of you have already made a career. How is it to be from the United States or England and to be in Belgium? To talk to people who've read your book.
Very cool.
It's
I mean, what does that?
I was just texting my brother before this because he's like, "What's it like?" I was like, "It's insane." And I was like, "These people are trying to teach me how to say the name of the location I'm in, yet they've read my book in Dutch." And I'm like, it's crazy how universal art is. Or we were driving here, the Devil Wears Prada came up, and we were both like, "I love that movie." And so it's beautiful to see. Like you can, something that starts alone in your room can then end up like in Belgium, in Dutch. Like that's really insane.
It's cool that you can pick up this book and not understand a word of it, or meet someone and you both know the same story and they've read that. It's like together.
What are the great things that you receive from your readers? I mean, besides the fact that people come to you and say I love your book and it was beautiful.
I could give it some chocolate fudge earlier, but
I think it gives us the validation that we're not wasting our time and that what we're doing isn't purely selfish, because it's hard to sit down and write 60,000, 100,000 words, and it feels like this exercise. Sometimes it's utility, but also egoism. Like, who am I to even think that this is worth someone's time? And then,
may I ask another question?
Yeah.
Do you understand the success? I mean, and every writer says, and of course not, I wasn't anticipating, but for instance, your books have been quite successful and series on TV. I mean, do you understand why people got to your books? And
I think they got to the books because of the TV show, and I'm the first one to admit it, and I'm really grateful. I was lucky. I think I wrote a book that resonated for people, but they found it because I had this extra visibility. So it was it's just like, lightning striking. It was just timing and luck.
Your book this is the first one, and I just noticed that it's the 3rd print already in Dutch.
oh, is it? I didn't know.
Yeah, 3rd print. So this means that a lot of people have bought your books.
Yes.
Or in Dutch. Do you understand the success? I mean, and again, every writer is going to be modest for saying, no, really not. Do you understand what resonated? That people are reading and buying your books in all different countries and languages.
Yeah, I mean it does blow my mind, like the numbers. Sometimes I'll get numbers on sales and things, and I'll just be like, it doesn't feel real, But at the same time, to be honest, what makes me feel it is when I get a message from somebody, a very personal message.
Yeah.
Recently, I received a letter from a man. He came to me at my book signing. He was very quiet. He was a very good-looking guy, 30 years old, kind of well-built, looked very confident. But he came in with my books hidden behind his back, and he came and he just kind of asked me to sign them. Didn't say anything. Like I was like, what did you like or something? And he just replied with one word. I signed his books. He walked out and he secretly put a letter on my desk, and I read it, and it was this whole story about how he'd never read a book before, he had bad eyesight, and he'd never felt confident about reading, and he'd been gifted my books, and now he loved reading, and thanked me for that, and that's the kind of stuff that makes me feel like I've made a difference, that I'm a real author. And I could write a book that only sells 20 copies, and have that reaction from a few people, and that would be enough for me. I mean, it'd be nice if I could make a living as well.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about our favourite kind of feedback, and mine is similar, and it's a mother who came to one of my speaking events, and she liked what I had to say, and she bought the book for her daughter. And then she got in touch like a day later, and she was just like, I just want to thank you so much. Like, she's 16, she hasn't picked up a book in 4 years, she has no interest. And the mother had said to her, like, I really feel like this is going to be okay though, because it's funny and it talks about what it's really like to be a teenager. And the teenager read it all in one night, and then the teenager reached out to like say what it meant to enjoy reading again. And it's just, it's like you say, like you can't really make sense of all the big crazy things because they just feel so abstract. And just,
you also never see someone, like my brother's a musician, and people will play his music and like tag him on Instagram, and then he'll put that on his story so you can see people consuming it. But you don't get to like watch someone read your book.
Exactly.
So when someone says this many people read your book, you're like, no. You know, where's the pictures?
I watched someone read your book though. They had it on the subway, and I was like, I wonder what part they're at. I just how far in they were.
Are there questions from the audience that you want to ask to one of the five authors? Someone? Don't be afraid, don't be shy. Or maybe you want to talk to them afterwards because, yeah, please.
I have a question for Tommy. It's a quite known video of you first holding your book. I think everybody knows what I'm referring to. What was your initial first thought when holding it? I really get your reaction to it, but also I really want to know why. Like,
it was like
Can you tell me what the story?
Oh yeah, so there's
Yeah.
a video of me holding my book for the first time, the final hardcover.
Yeah.
And I'm very emotional in it. I basically just burst into tears. And I'm like, oh my god, it's real, and I'm like really crying. Luckily, it wasn't my super ugly cry. There was like level 2, like it was like a lot of that. And I put it online, and then it went like viral. So then a lot of people were like, I'm crying. And again, it was that weird thing of being like, wait, what? Can you show me pictures just so I can understand? But it was
What was the emotion? What was the?
It was like holding both my dream in my hand, and also the book is very personal. So it also felt like holding my heart in my hand, but I didn't admit to myself I wanted to be a writer until very recently, but I've been doing it for as long as I could like physically put words together. So that was always the dream, and then hold it and be like, this is real. Especially also, it's a very emotional book. And the writing was like really physically taxing.
Yeah.
Like I have all these new white hairs along my hairline, so the book took from me a lot. So it was just to hold all of that, because I think so rarely things in our lives are like you can hold it. You have these achievements, and sometimes you'll get a diploma, or like, or I guess I keep saying when I have a kid, I want to compare the feelings because it kind of felt like, oh my god, I made you.
Yeah.
And yes, it was really overwhelming.
Yeah, it really touched me because I want to one day perhaps become an author too, and just even my best friend sent it to me.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about like this is just we were really happy for you when we watched it together. Like,
How was that for you when you first held your first book in your hand? And the emotion, it was, can
I can't add much more to that because it was like that, but not as powerful. Like I don't, yeah.
Does it feel like people make sometimes comparisons like a baby? I mean, it's a stupid comparison. But,
I've never had a baby.
Yeah,
so
like I don't have a baby, and I didn't want to offend mothers.
Yeah.
And I was like,
sometimes
as
you
close as I've gotten.
hear that.
You're very proud. It's a sense of pride and
Yeah, okay,
achievement.
yeah, I can understand.
And like we were saying, how it's all very abstract. When it arrives in your hand, that abstractness moves into reality for at least 5 minutes, and then it becomes like an object in the room, and you're like kind of like, oh yeah, okay. But that's special.
And also relief. Like it's so many points you convince yourself it's not gonna happen. Like you think you're never gonna finish, and then you do, and it's never gonna sell to a poster. And oh my god, someone's bought it, but I'm never gonna be able to do all the revisions. And you just at every point, I'm checking my email and my voicemail, like waiting for that moment where they're gonna call me and cancel and say it's all over. And I think it wasn't until I held that book, I'm like, it's too late. You're not gonna burn me at this point.
Maybe time for one more last question. If you absolutely want to ask, please do.
Yeah.
Can you speak up a bit, please? Thank you.
I have a question for Laura. I read your book and it's like a feminist touch in it, and I really like it, and I think every girl should read it. But how did the voice read your book? Because it's a little bit harsh to understand. Yeah. I don't think it is up to God. It is harsh, and it doesn't pull any punches. And when we were kind of like a few months out from releasing the advanced copies, my editors sat me down and they were like, we want you to be prepared for some people really hating this book, because it doesn't shy away from issues and the thoughts behind them. I have had some vicious reviews. Some of them are just hilarious. And they're all from men. And they hate me so much, and it's hilarious. I really thought it would upset me, but it just makes me think, do you know what, I'm just glad I got a reaction. I think it's better than like a 2 or 3 star review, this book was okay. Like, I'd rather that someone felt really passionately about it, because it means they're thinking about
What was the most vicious reaction? I don't want you to what kind of reactions did you get?
So one just said it was because I was a slut and I just wanted to excuse my own behavior. And so they went on Facebook and like looked at, so I have intense privacy settings on my Facebook, but you can see my profile pictures, and there's one from when I'm a teenager and I'm drinking alcohol, and he like screen grabbed it and was like, this is evidence that she is a slut and she is that character. I'm just like, oh yes, I have Bacardi freezer, I must be a slut.
But is there something of you in this?
Not in her experiences, but her personality is very much like mine. It's kind of an exaggerated version. But no, I was a prude in high school. I was like, I like to go out and have fun, but I was also very much a Hermione Granger. So I think I kind of like live vicariously through my character. So yeah.
These are 5 beautiful authors written beautiful books, and you should all read them. And they're going to sign the books if you buy them, and you can have a chat with them. So thank you very much.
So if you've watched the long Q&A, I just wanted to say that watching authors talk like that about their work with passion, like at some moments I was just like, it got really hard to listen. I wanted to listen, but in the sense like that I really felt like crying sometimes, because I know the emotional struggle of that being an author can bring, like being a writer can bring, and just seeing it, just seeing how they talk about their books, how they work and work and work, and how it is not just a simple job, and they explain it as such, is such a beautiful thing to watch. For example, I also talked to Tommy about writing, because I asked her a writing question, and you see she's a very supportive author. She would listen to you very, very intensely. Like, she really looks at you, looks you straight in the eye, and she's a very good listener. Same for Laura Stephen. She's such a quirky person, very, very fun to listen to, and she really has a voice. She's like very spontaneous, and I really love that. Cass Morgan is a very gentle woman, I can see that, but like a very gentle person that would really listen to you, and she really seems like a very great person, and I love talking to her also. Same for Taron. He's quite a quiet person. I got a first hunch of him, but he's lovely to talk to, and he's a very wise person. You can see it in the way he talks about his books, about what he writes, how he writes, and that was really, really great. Also, the last author I met, Sarah Holland, is also a very intelligent person. You can see that because when you talk to her, she really looks at you, and she's really thinking what to answer next, what are they saying, and you don't really see that in a lot of people, thinking so focusedly and hard on what people are saying to really understand and to give some input in what they are saying. And that is why it's just generally so amazing to have met those authors. And I have not yet read the books of them, but I'm really planning on doing that this summer or as soon as I can, because high school is really breaking my back and I cannot handle at the moment, but it will all be fine, hopefully. So yeah, that's that. So you guys, I hope you enjoyed this little vlog kind of video. I really had a lot of fun going. I really love going to book fairs, and if you ever see me over there, you can just jump by and say hi and whatnot. So yeah, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.